much more concerned about the athletic program or the gym or this or that. And for me, when I talk to homeschool parents, Kirkland, it's a lot more like it used to be when I first started with it.
It's real coffee.
I was principal at Canterbury Christian School up in Oregon, and it's a little place called Stratton's. It was about 140 students, about a little bigger than this, but about the same. I campus. We had K-12.
I'm sure you're having fun for that one shake.
Principal at four Christian schools. It's closer to like around here, Bean Valley would be the size. It was about 1,800 students. But we had 5 campuses. That's what I was doing earlier.
Our valley's just the opposite of
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the first Bay Area Christian Education Meetup. And we have our Canterbury family here. Welcome, Kathleen. Come on, come and see. We just
You don't close the door or no?
You can
Leave it open.
We have the heater on, but we won't call the boss.
Hello.
Here on the table if you touch them.
the door being open lets people know where it is.
That's true.
I'm your teacher here, right? Okay.
So before we get started, I'm going to go over briefly what my goal is here. And my goal is to do meetups like this semi-regularly on different topics related to Christian education. And not to just have them at Canterbury, but to be a cooperative thing with other Christian schools. So we're trying to build a better network of folks who are involved in Bay Area Christian education and really reinforce the idea that even though we are in the middle of probably one of the most progressive communities in the country, that there is still a place here where parents want to provide their children with a strong Christian education. We need to be providing that network. Here at Canterbury, we only provide K through 6. So we've, over the years, developed partnerships with preschools and high schools and homeschoolers to make sure that the kids go from cradle to marriage with good education. So having those relationships is important. This particular venue that I want to have today is going to be unusual because I'm going to be the speaker. In the future, I hope that we'll have more important and more qualified folks than myself.
Amen.
Hey.
None better looking.
Well, that's certainly true.
Does it get better?
Or more humble, of course. But we do have with us, with you all, a very qualified group of folks to be here tonight. And so I'm going to go around the table. We're going to have a chance to introduce yourself. Then I'm going to spend between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on how it goes, describing low-tech education. Why is it that Canterbury Christian School doesn't have an iPad in the hand of every student? Why is it that we don't have typing classes for our first graders? Is there a rationale behind that? And then we're going to have a period for you to have a discussion. And this isn't the type of place where only my view is welcome. You may think that having an iPad in your child's hand is a good thing, and you might have an anecdote to share to that. And so this is a place where we discuss that type of thing. Now the theme is low-tech education, but as you will see in my presentation, it's more about approach and philosophy to education, and how our philosophy informs what tools we think are important. And so before we begin, I'd like to start with Mrs. Kuiper. Introduce yourself, or how you're related to this group, or what you do for fun.
I'm related to this group as a fifth grader from K to 6 here. And they're now graduated from college and almost graduated from college.
And I'm a third grade teacher here. Third grade teacher.
Oh, perfect.
I used to be at Stevens Christian School.
I was giving you the name. Okay.
So I've been here 3 years. It's my 3rd year. Oh no, this is my 4th year. Yeah, that's better. 4th year. And I love hiking and walking. Yeah.
He's our only astronaut on staff.
Yes. My secret identity.
We're going to do a chair here for you.
up next.
All right, I'm Claudia. I'm one of the moms, third grade mom. My son's been going here since first grade.
I'm Amanda, I'm another mom, my son's also in fifth grade, and, this is your son?
Alright, we skipped over you, I'm sorry. Want you to introduce yourself, how you're connected here to Canterbury?
I'm Rebecca, and my daughter is third grade, Gianna.
Third grade's dominating here.
However, she has a daughter that graduated.
Right.
She survived fifth grade.
Grade 6.
I'm not a mother. Yeah, so I am Bill. I am, my daughter's in Mrs. Kuiper's class.
Bill?
Bill. But I have the perspective of having kids, the parents' age here, and the kids' age here. So I have a son who's 36, another son who's 32, and I have a daughter who's 10. And so there are quite a few parents here who are the same age as my kids, and their kids are the same age as my kid. And so I kind of feel like I can see how things will turn out at times. Not always, of course, because everybody's unique, but I have that perspective. Doesn't help me at home with my wife because it's her first time. I teach PE here.
Do you?
I know I actually get to go play with the kids. I know teaching's questionable at times, but I happen to think I have a direction in mind. Just keep it.
So all your children attended here?
No. My kids grew up in Asia.
Older
The
too?
two older grew up in Japan.
Oh,
So I have also that perspective of being Asian American, American Asian.
sure.
So they're not Chinese, but they're Japanese. But there is that bicultural
Sure.
perspective that I am able to have some insight
And
into.
of course, we have Dr. King here.
And people call me Hap, so that's.
He's not only is he our Abeka rep, but he's very knowledgeable and been a very
You drove away from Texas for what now?
well.
They could be home in time.
But you can describe what you do.
I drove down from Klamath Falls, Oregon, that's where I live, or Klamath Falls area. I suppose since you're giving a little bit of a memories about Christian education, I've got a pretty good, whatever I say about Christian education, it's not only that I have lived it, worked it, taught it. I'm a product of a Christian school, never attended a public school a day in my life until I went to the University of Oregon for my PhD. My wife never attended a public school at all. And she's a nurse. My children never attended a public school, and I have 5, and they never attended a public school. And I now have 9 grandchildren, and not one of them has ever attended a public school. So we are very
That's a
philosophical.
good resume.
Yes.
We are, that's more important than all the pedigrees that a guy could have after his name.
The grandchildren.
Because I sleep at night. I really do. And even if one of my kids, I at least know in my heart that we did the very best we could. And I would say either school, Christian school or homeschool. That's where my kids have been, or my grandchildren have been. So, yeah. It's just something that I believe in.
And with the transition from the Johnsons here at Canterbury, Dr. King's been very helpful in guiding us through changes in the Abeka curriculum or anything upcoming down the pipe, and his experience leading Christian schools as well. So he's been a resource for me. So I'm very thankful to even be here tonight.
Yeah, I cover the north of Bakersfield to the Canadian border, Idaho, Nevada, and Pacific Islands. So I'm moving all the time.
You notice how he said Pacific Islands, he didn't say he gets sent to Hawaii.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Hawaii is in there.
They asked me if I wanted to suffer for Jesus 15 years ago, and I said, oh, yeah, please. Sign me up. I go to Hawaii twice a year. I cover the Hawaiian Islands. So, yeah.
Abeka sunscreen, right?
That's right.
Of course.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Nelson. My son Benjamin, he's attending kindergarten here right now.
And I also have an older one. He's 8th grade, and he went through here from K to 6. So Miss Kuiper was his 5th grade teacher.
Kathleen?
Kathleen, yes.
I wear hearing aids, folks, so sometimes I don't quite hear, so I apologize if I don't.
My name is Andrea Schwartz, and I don't have children here, and I never did have children here. I was a homeschool mom for almost 30 years because my kids are kind of spread out. But I have a passion for Christian education, and it's not very popular, but I think if you're a Christian, you don't have your child getting a Christian education. There's a category of child abuse that I think that would fall under because you're not learning the truth, they're not receiving the truth, and they're missing the truth, capital T, if they go anyplace else. So I'm very happy to have some sort of affiliation with you guys here.
Yeah. And then Andrea and I also do a podcast that she started called Out of the Question, and so that's available with the Cal Seaton Foundation if you guys are interested in that. And then if you're so interested in learning more about philosophy of Christian education, we'll be doing a book club online at the beginning of next month on Bruce's John Rushdoony's book, The Messianic Character of American Education, which was a lot of the motivation behind the modern Christian school movement and gave it the kind of philosophical foundation that it has today.
You say it's the messianic character of
American education, right.
And we'll briefly touch on that here. I won't go into that particular book, but on that subject. And all of you, of course, know who I am. I'm Father Stephen Macias. I'm headmaster here at Canterbury Christian School and the priest at St. Paul's. And today, I think you'll see this. We're going to do a presentation on low-tech education. And as I said at the beginning, about why we do it the way we do it here at Canterbury. And then following that, we're going to do a roundtable discussion. I'm going to give Dr. King a few minutes directly after my presentation to give a moderated view of how education is used or how technology is used in the Beckett curriculum, and maybe perhaps critique me a little bit. And then we'll kick it back to the rest of the room and allow you guys to put your input in, ask questions for the professional, and bug me about what things you want to see here at Canterbury. So with that, I'm going to stand and begin. So, first slide I have with us today is a history lesson, but because I think what they stand for represents sort of a high point of what a good Christian education does. Alexander Hamilton studied at Columbia, but before day one in college, he already had a mastery of both Latin and Greek, as did most men who attended any of these schools. They were expected to know the classic languages. What does that say about our education system today that you and I and our grandparents did when we went to college? We barely knew English, right? So James Madison is famous. You know, these two men, from their thoughts, give forth the founding principles. And so they all have particular things about them that are strange, but what's remarkable is we have records of these men being able to translate Virgil, Cicero, and that these men, these Western literature characters, existed in their imaginations because of the idea of Christian education they received. You can go through all the founding fathers, even the ones with less formal education, like George Washington, and they have this background of Western civilization that was part of Christian education during this period. In fact, I have with us here something that's a little more exciting than that, and this is a standard school exam from 1912. So I want you to imagine from the founding of our country, understanding what Christian education was, until as late as 1912, the standards were much higher. And this is an exam that they would use going from 8th grade to high school. This is from a small county in Kentucky, and it was basically an entrance exam for high school. And I'll read a couple of these here, and then I'll pass this around. But not only does it have emphasis on spelling and arithmetic, but there's also an emphasis on grammar that's missing from our schools. What 8th grader, besides the ones here at Canterbury, is taught to memorize the different parts of speech, diagram sentences, to do those various practices that we would expect from college-level English professors. Ideas like basic geography. You've all seen these YouTube videos where they go to a college campus and they say, can you point to Iran on a map? And the students are completely lost. Well, here on this test, you'll see, name the states along the Ohio River, right? Locate on a map, Mobile, Quebec, Buenos Aires, Liverpool, name the 3 largest states in the United States. Stuff that we don't imagine would be standard for freshmen in high school anymore. So I'll pass this around. One last comment about this before I move on is that one question on there is, name the 3 branches of government. And as you all saw recently, you can now be elected to our Congress without knowing the 3 branches with our newest elected Congresswoman. But what we can see through the founding of our nation, through 1912, with these high standards, this expectation of maturity so early on in education, is what they were able to achieve with low tech, with almost no resources. There's no calculator, there's no computer, there's barely even written materials. Imagine the library of men like James Madison, the library of men like Benjamin Franklin. Growing up, it was such a luxury to have books. You and I, when we have a few hundred books in our library, would be considered lavishly wealthy by their standards. Yet these men who had limited access to books read Cicero and somehow adapted it to their memory so much that it shows up in their quotations of their letters, their papers, and in the principles of what they worked on. Education meant something completely different prior to 1912. Moving from there, we have something I'm going to call the Dick and Jane generation. There is something drastically broken between this 1900s generation, between that and this new Dick and Jane generation. What happens is there's a group of sociologists and psychologists and philosophers who introduce a new theory of education. Specifically, in the 1920s, with a series of readers. You might have heard of these before. Read with Dick and Jane. And these are famous for teaching not literacy, but socialization. They taught to read by memorizing words by sight rather than phonetically. So parents here who have only had kids through Canterbury might not be familiar with the idea that public schools beginning at this time began to think that maybe that we were teaching English the wrong way. Maybe we need to teach English the way that other languages teach their language. For example, Chinese. Chinese is a symbol-based language. They have a hieroglyph that represents a word, and to memorize or to learn to read in those languages, you memorize thousands of those symbols or hieroglyphs. Well, English has always been a phonetic language. We have 26 letters, a limited number of sounds, a limited number of blends. Any 4 or 5-year-old child can memorize all of the phonetic sounds and learn to read. In the 1920s, they said, what if each English word were itself one of those hieroglyphs? Instead of the word Jane being a combination of phonetic sounds, it was that one word. And so the books taught to read by memorizing those words. So you memorize run and see or jump. And you can imagine that it was much more difficult for them to learn to read that way. But that wasn't really a problem because men who devised this, like John Dewey, thought that socialization was more important than literacy. And we talk about socialization in our modern culture as the ability to get along with other people. What they understood as socialization was submitting to my political and social ideals. And so it was more important that people were able to be controlled and put into a system than to be able to think and process ideas. So you see a movement from phonetics to sight words, memorizing specific words, into our more modern sense of whole language theory, where not only are you substituting phonetics for memorizing sight words, but also you're taking all of the meaning away from words and allowing children, as they learn to read, to develop meaning for what words mean themselves. So no longer is there an objective idea of what the word is means, but rather it's a whole language theory. Whatever the child thinks the word means is what it can mean. And it really is based on this idea that becoming popular at this time of looking at individuals as part of an evolutionary process, as a behavior-based creature, where you can modify this behavior and that behavior to get the outcome you want, rather than recognizing that we were created with certain intrinsic dignities and that there were certain models of truth and objectivity that could teach us and be taught. So moving from there, because of this view of education, because of moving away from phonetics, moving away from standard truth, moving away from our Christian heritage, American literacy spirals down. We are now, here in the United States, ranked near the bottom of developed countries in both math and science. Here in California, we are ranked 38 out of 50 in our schools. And that's with spending next to the top per pupil. You know, the state of California on average spends $13,000 per year per student, and yet we're still at the bottom. Today in the United States, more than 30 million adults cannot read, write, or do basic math above a third grade level. So could you imagine spending $13,000 a year for 16 years, and then at the end of this, they can barely read? It's a result of the philosophy that came before it. And the sad truth is, while 8th graders 100 years ago were able to solve complex grammar, math, geography problems, 2/3 of students entering the 8th grade, leaving the 8th grade, entering high school today, cannot do so at grade level. They're below and behind. So, the solution posited by the modern American education system is we need more money and we need more technology. Right? If only our students each had their own computer. If only our students had the skills of typing and word processing and understanding how to use technology, they could get ahead. If only these digital aids could help us get our students right back on the right track. There's this idea, and it's been perpetuated with billions of dollars, that the solution to America's failing system is more technology in the classroom, more screens, more devices, more tech. But what is the reality? I'm going to go through a couple of news headlines here. You'll see them just briefly. But here, Forbes talks about a program in Peru where they successfully had one laptop per each student. Millions of dollars spent, test scores, literacy, student success went down. And it's not a surprise because even the secular psychologists will admit that here on our brain, the screen time, the time we spend in front of televisions, video games, computers, iPads, actually changes the physiological structures of our brains. There was a recent study done where they put children in MRIs and they measured their brains as they did these various activities, and they could see the negative effects of this screen time on their children. It changes the brain, and it changes it in the most important areas: emotional processing, executive attention, decision making, and cognitive control. All of the areas that are necessary to be at their peak for education. Here we have an Australian Sydney Grammar School recently banned laptops completely after years and years of spending budget money with no results. The top schools were becoming not the top schools by instituting more technology. Here we have something from the New York Times that talks about the relationship between increased technology and what we understand today as attention deficit disorder. There are folks today who believe that our children are just wired to be ADD, or our children are just wired to be rambunctious, or our child are wired to be rebellious. And they don't take a step back and think, what have I done that might have created this behavior? And so psychology today is saying, well, a lot of these attention deficit behaviors are created by our bad habits that we introduce to our children, mainly allowing them too much television, too much video games, too much screen time. And study after study shows that not only do these habits hurt the children, that they are ridiculously addictive. The more we introduce, the more their brains want it. You all are familiar with the dopamine reaction. Because they spent some time in the screen, it gave them that positive response, and now they want more screen. And so it's this terrible cycle that the more screen time, the more tech they give them, the worse off they do. All right, and here we have studies. These are international studies, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They said that students who use computers frequently, they studied schools in developed countries, United States and Europe, schools that use computers regularly produce worse readers, worse students. Those who have successfully adapted technological solutions actually make their schools worse, and students are worse for it. Worse than here, there is a direct correlation between how much technology, how much screen time a child has, and the kinds of grades they'll end up getting. Now, of course, all of us will say, well, my son played lots of television, he did great all throughout high school. That's probably true. There should be exceptions. Your son could have also gone to sleep at 4 a.m. and got up at 6 a.m. and still done fine. But the normative situation for most students, it's showing that the more time they spend with technology, the worse they do. And it says it's significant. It's not just going from A to B, but students who spend more than an hour a day with screen time, that's watching television after school, went from getting a B to getting a D. So it's significant. So what's the solution? How do we address this failing technological system? How do we bring back the education system that created men like James Madison, or bring back the education system that promoted literacy? And there's a couple things I want to talk about. One is handwriting and haptics. That is the connection between touch, see, and know, what we do with our bodies and how it relates to the keyboard. Second, I'm going to talk about physical books. We hear a lot about e-books and digital books. Is there anything special about paper books? Then I'm going to talk about memorization. I remember growing up in public education and hating my teachers because I had a calculator at home, but they would never let me use the calculator in the classroom. And I thought, well, when I go home, I can just use the calculator. Why am I wasting my time here? Well, that same phenomenon is now happening in education. It's a phenomenon I'll talk about in a second related to Googling. So, and then finally, critical thinking. We have to be careful and that embracing technology, allowing technology that's not replacing our children's problem-solving skills. There are some problems that our kids don't know they're solving until they've worked through them. And when we use technology as a crutch, distracting them, giving them all the answers right away, there are certain milestones, both neurologically, physiologically, that they're missing in critical thinking. So going back to psychology today, we use cursive here at Canterbury. Rebecca teaches cursive. We're one of the few schools in this area that mandates it. And it's always a surprise in open houses, always a surprise when people come in to see kindergartners writing in cursive. But it's more than just a pledge of honor or something to encourage people to sign up. Modern secular psychologists, cursive writing helps train the brain to integrate visual and tactile information and fine motor dexterity. New York Times says, putting pen to paper stimulates the brain like nothing else. They talk about how the two hemispheres of the brain, left and right, by drawing and writing, are better receiving and processing information. That's not possible typing at a desk. So kindergarten through 5th grade, when you're in the charter school or the public school tapping away on your Chromebook, you're actually losing out by not doing cursive. And this is this Google study I want to talk to you about, how the web affects our memory. Just like that calculator cheating in our math test, how much of our behaviors are being shaped by what technology we used. And I can show this very simply. Who here has had their cell phone die and they need to remember their work phone number? Right? Now, if you were to go back 15 years ago, when you didn't have a cell phone that memorized all of, maybe it's a little longer than 15 years ago, but when you didn't have a cell phone that memorized all of your phone numbers, you probably could have remembered your office phone number, your grandpa's phone number, your great uncle's phone number, the aunt that only visits one time on Thanksgiving. You had a Rolodex in your mind of numbers because you knew, you had this cognitive discipline that said, I need to remember these things, because if I don't remember them, I won't know how to form them. What is happening to your children when every time they need an answer, well, let me Google that. What is happening to your children when every time they need a solution, let me see what's on YouTube, right? What are they doing? Think about those phone numbers. What would have been there? What information would they have stored had they not gone to Google? Google itself did the study and said, oops, we're bad for your kids. We're a great tool. We allow you to do many more things, but we are negatively affecting your cognitive memory. Now this one here, this is the International Journal of Education Research, and this is probably one of the more contentious papers they've written. And this is, what is better, paper books or Kindle books? Paper books or ebooks? And they did their study, and their results were students who read text printed scored significantly better on reading comprehension. What that means is those who read books on paper remember more than those who read books digitally. So the question is, I'll go to that in a second. The question is, if we know that technology is creating bad habits, it's inhibiting our children's ability to read, it's slowing down their development of basic learning skills, it's making them their memories worse, it's doing all of these negative things, why would we want to put it into the elementary school? Why are so many folks interested in supplementing what already exists with technology? Well, the sad thing is, most people don't have a place like Canterbury that has continued to use the traditional methods since 1974. The other schools with their other tactics are really failing to provide a quality education. And so they try to lift up what they're failing with digital crutches. But this question here, I'm going to borrow from Dr. Rushdie, and I want it to be an encouragement to you as parents, because part of what's most frustrating for me in this digital conversation is most parents feel like this is a conversation way over their head. That maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Maybe I'm giving them too much screen time, maybe not enough. Maybe they should have learned to type when they were wearing diapers or not. But Dr. Rushdie talks about the most difficult thing there is for a teacher and a pupil. And he says that one event is when a mother teaches its mother tongue to a child. Right? When a brand new child who has no language skills is taught an entire language by a mother. And most mothers don't go to education school, they don't learn all the proper phonetic declensions or whatever it is. But every child naturally picks up language. You, mothers and fathers, parents and educators, just by nature, are gifted as teachers. You've already demonstrated for most of you. And that's because God has set up parents as the primary educators for their children. And so there is a certain feeling you're going to have in your gut about what is the best for your kids, because you're already their primary teacher. And it's really confirmed by what I believe is our model for education. And this is based on the Trivium, or classical education model. Some of you were here at the beginning of the year, heard me talk about Dorothy Sayers and how she broke up the development of a child into 3 different types of education. There's a grammar at the younger ages, dialectic in the middle ages, and rhetoric at the older ages. But why technology is so dangerous here is because we are here at the grammar stage, right here in the roots. And what we do every day with using our Rebecca curriculum, memorizing times tables, using phonetics, getting that solid foundation, is those little roots stretching out and forming the base. And every time we supplant our child's growth with screen time, every time we make one of those roots a little bit shorter because we wanted to give them an iPad and tap, 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 every time we said it wasn't really important for them to learn cursive and that root got a little short, we are taking away from the roots and foundation of the street. Here, we must recognize here in this grammar stage, that the hard work of pencil on paper, of cursive, of memorizing all of those little pieces provides the foundation for the rest of their education. It's no coincidence that the United States is last in math and science when they gave up reading. It's no coincidence we became last in innovation when we gave up reading. Right? If we don't focus on these fundamentals here at elementary school and get all of the distractions, all of the other stuff out of the way, and focus on what worked for James Madison, what worked for the kids 100 years ago, what worked before Dewey tried to ruin it all, then we're going to miss out on these formative years. As you all know, once they get past a certain age, there's really no looking back. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor to Dr. King, give him a few minutes to respond, and then to all of you as well.
Well, I don't have any big response other than to say amen. You have defined, when he invited me to come, I said, well, I may be a little bit of a counterpoint because I'm kind of not a low-tech technology guy, I'm kind of a mid-tech. But what you're describing as tech, I would agree.
Right.
I would absolutely agree. At Rebecca Pensacola Christian College, we have all, and this is the problem with technology at the younger ages. What we've tried to do is we've tried to supplant a teacher or a parent
That's right.
with a machine.
That's right.
We would agree with that 100%. It doesn't work. Now, you can, children, they're not to be self-taught. That's an adult activity. Now, they're to learn how to grow into that, but ultimately they're to be taught by a teacher, by a parent, by a pastor. These are the people in their lives who should have the greatest influence. Now, what I would just simply say, at Rebecca Book, we have, and you mentioned it earlier, you asked if we still have the video school. What that is and what you are decrying are very different things.
Certainly, yeah.
They're very different things. And when a lot of people talk about that as being technology, the video school that we have is actually, it's not the children tapping away at a computer. I mean, you can play it on a computer, but they don't have to do anything. They still have to take notes. It's a film, if you will, of an actual classroom.
That's right.
And they have to interact and respond like a classroom. The only difference is the teacher is on a screen.
2D instead of 3D. Yeah.
That's why I say it's a little mid-tech. It's not, because we don't have that person. And for schools that are, they've got to put 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade all in one grade for 7 kids. Okay, you have a whole different set of issues at that point that I think a technology program or a video program like ours can solve. We would say things like, we do have digital textbooks in the high school.
Mm-hmm.
They are, again, digital textbooks have kind of become the weak sister of a lot of places. Everybody was harping to get them, and we held off on it for a long time. You can get digital textbooks, you can save a few bucks doing that, but we find that most children prefer the hard textbook. When you think about what's actually going on, if you're gonna, digital books work fine. I have 3 or 4 stories on my phone, and I use it when I go to a restaurant or something, and I read, stupid novels or some dumb thing like that. But I have my Bible there too. But in terms of, if I were going to sit down and develop a sermon,
Mm-hmm.
or develop a research paper, I might look something up or get a clarification or something. I don't do that this way. There's a reason. Because if you think about it, when you're using a computer, the reason it's so difficult is a computer stacks pages. When you're doing research, you spread it out over a desk.
Yeah.
Now, some people I've gone, I don't know if you have this or not, I don't remember, so if I cross the line here, forgive me. But I've gone into some Christian school offices, and the principal or the secretary will have a computer, and they'll have 3 or 4 screens, and some of those screens are split into 3 or 4 pages. And the reason that's the case is because when you're doing, if I'm doing reading with a book on my digital, whether it's my phone or my iPad or whatever, if I want to find something, it's like I have a stack of pages, and now I have to go hunting through the pages, put one on top. Then if I want something else, I can't put them out here to the side. So it becomes, it really isn't as efficient as some people make it out to be. Now, if you're just going to read a novel, you know, whether I remember to take a quiz on it, you know, if you're just going to do some joyriding and joy reading, then that works perfectly well. The other thing is, for technology can work well if a student has the fundamentals. I've said this to people, if you want to find out the nature of our math situation, or not even our math, our arithmetic situation, which is the grammar of math.
Right.
Just go to Walmart or just go to one of the local 7-Elevens and have the power fail.
Cash.
And watch it.
Cash.
Yeah, and watch these people. You know, I remember one time, I can't remember the specific, but I was at a little station up in the Sierras. I pulled in to get some gas and a cup of coffee while I was driving down. And I walked in, and the guy, you know, he was sitting there and he says, you know, my cash register isn't working right. And so he put down the amount and he was working to add them up. Well, I just added them up in my head, you know, because it was 2 or 3 items. It wasn't a big thing. And then I think it came down to $19 or $29 and 83 cents or something like that. Well, I gave him enough so that he'd have to give me a quarter back, and he, you know, $1.25 back, and he, you know, and I handed it to him without even thinking, and you know, he was stumped, and I said, "Oh, this is what you owe me," you know, and he looked at it, and then he finally worked it out, managed to work it out, and he did have to pull a calculator out to do it, that he had on his own. He was able to do it, and he looked at it, and it was the same thing, and he goes, "Wow, you are super in math." Now, I was gracious. I said, "Well," I said, "I use it all the time," and I said, I have to think that way all the time, so you probably don't, and so don't feel bad." Well, I wanted to say, you know, you got robbed in your education, but I didn't. I was gracious. And we say at Rebecca Book, we don't want children to have to use calculators in their elementary mathematics or their elementary arithmetic. We want them to learn to think like calculators. You have to do that. If you have a mastery of subject matter, when you come to things, and by the way, I don't care for the term critical thinking, but and there's a reason why. Critical thinking it's commonly used, but it's been co-opted. If you go to criticalthinking.org, which is the people who are advocating for it, it is a style of thinking based in skepticism and based in a philosophy of absolute relativism and constructivism. You don't want to do that. We at Rebecca talk about analogical thinking. Analogical thinking means we think God's thoughts after Him, and we put, you know, if A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, sure, we want the children to be able to infer that A is bigger than C. Now that's a little oversimplification, but that's what critical thinking does in the secular side is it is very much a societal evaluation. And when children start answering these questions, they're telling these teachers that are, there's all about your family, all about your values, everything.
Mm.
And they were laying it out. I won't take the time to give an example of this more, if we can do it later if somebody wants. The other thing, when you mentioned phonics, this isn't to do with technology, but understand, if you were to look at our book called The Handbook for Reading, okay? I don't know if you've ever gone to the very front page of that. You were mentioning Madison and people like this. It wasn't quite the book that they would have used, but if you look at the front matters, the original book was published in 1763.
Wow. Yeah.
Our Handbook for Reading is the book, it is the phonics book that taught America to read. Abraham Lincoln used Handbook for Reading. Thomas Jefferson, when he was a young man, used it. When Andrew Jackson used it as well. That's who we know of. But it was the common book in public schools at the time. And so
Is
you
this what
cannot.
Sorry, is this what Canterbury uses? I'm just trying
Yes,
to
yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
they use it.
it's called Handbook for Reading.
It's called, well, that's right. It was written by a fellow by the name of Webster. Does that sound familiar? He was the great American lexicographer that codified American English. And it literally, the phonics that we use, it's called intensive phonics. It comes from the horse's mouth. Now, all other types of phonics that you see, even phonetic, many of them are sight phonic systems. He didn't touch on that. But the sight phonic system is what they did was they said, okay, this sight system isn't working very well. So what we're going to do is we're not going to go back to the original. No, we're going to back up a little. And instead of teaching cat and saying, or memorizing the word cat, the hieroglyph, if you will, cat, we're going to go back and we're going to teach the kids, let's look at this hieroglyph and call it a cat, the thing that sheds on you at night on your pillow. That's what we're going to learn. But then we're going to go back and we're going to learn the phonetic sounds within the hieroglyph. That's a sight phonics system.
Mm.
And we have many curriculums and many things that purport to be phonics that actually teach phonics that way.
I see.
That is not,
So you're saying sight phonics is not the same as what was found in Handbook for Reading?
absolutely not.
That's backwards.
Can you explain it?
That's, your way is backwards. That what you're just describing
The
as,
sight phonics, yeah.
the sight phonics is backwards.
Yeah, it's a hybrid, and I would say it this way, I don't think it's a very good phonics system, and it's not a very good sight system. It's one of those. But a phonetic system, we start with the sounds. You start with the short vowel sounds, and then you go to the consonants.
So I'm just trying to get this straight. So Handbook for Reading uses the phonetic system, and sight phonics is what you were just
This
describing.
is what I was describing, and that's not what we're doing. I'm saying that a lot of people that claim to have a phonetics system really don't. What they have is they have this sight phonic approach.
Yeah. So
And a good way to find it is, are you teaching whole words? Now, there are a certain number of sight words that are irreducible. When we teach a child to read, if you're going to teach a word like the, you have to have the word the to make sense of a sentence. At a back of book, I get this all the time. We go into Christian schools and they say, what are your lists of sight words? Well, we've got about 12. A, I, the, they, some words that you have to but they're beyond the phonetics of where the kids, so they just they memorize them for that purpose. What these people are looking at, they're looking for 400 to 500 sight words that the kids memorize.
Right. Like if you were learning Chinese and you wanted to be able to
Cat, dog,
pick up the
pig.
newspaper, you learn the most common words that would
Yeah,
appear in the newspaper.
That's exactly right. So anyway, I think that I don't have a thing in the world. Computers do not replace children, or do not replace
Teachers
teachers.
even.
It's interesting, here in the Bay Area, you have, and it's a totally, some of you may know it, it's a totally secular, New Age type school. It's the Waldorf schools.
That's right. The Waldorf.
They're all low tech.
They won't tell you.
They don't use. And I find it interesting that people who run the Googles of the world and run these other high-tech companies, they send their kids there. And they don't have this stuff in their houses. That ought to tell us something.
I think it's Jobs who said that his kids don't have iPads or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, and to echo what you said,
Anyway, that's my 3 cents at this point. We can talk about it.
What grade are the kids at Canterbury using handbook for reading?
I think that's the very beginning of it.
Yeah, we start out with, the actual book is used in first, second, and for a smidge in 3rd grade. Kindergarten uses the same principles that are taught in Handbook for Reading, but we don't introduce the book. We have a thing called My Blended Word Book. It's an abbreviated version of that. It's not as extensive.
And you're saying that this handbook for reading is the same as was published in 1700s?
1763.
So
Yeah, it actually was it was Webster's Handbook for Reading, and he, you may have, the actual readers that came from it that ultimately were based upon it, were what was known as the McGuffey reading system. Now, McGuffey reading system, you can still get those readers. They
Yeah, a few
read.
around
If you
there.
have you want a copy, I have some in my office.
You know,
Yes.
But the problem with, and we used to use a lot of the McGuffey system with Rebecca. The problem with it is it is so quaint, shall we say, that children today don't buy, unless you live with me. I have horses. You don't buy a bale of hay for a horse. You buy a gallon of gas for a car. Now, you can get the same principles by doing that, but we found that, we still have a couple of the McGuffey readers in our system, but we found that, they seriously needed to be updated so that, the stories contained therein could be, kids could, relate to that.
That's right.
So that's the criticism we would have there, but it's not, the stories are excellent, and the language, the literature is excellent. Something else that kids don't do today is they don't memorize poetry like they used to.
That's right. Well, they do here.
Well, and that's good. We do demand poetry memory, at least if you're using it the way it's designed. Children will learn 10 to 12 poems a year.
That's right.
And,
So, I have some thinking about this. I do agree at the elementary stage when the kids are young. I think excessive exposure to typing is definitely good for the brain development. But then to another hand, I think everything have always pro and con. So I think if the computer cannot replace the teacher 100%, but at the same time, do you think it's would be best for the children if given them 0% exposure? My opinion is yes, typing have some drawback if we expose them too much. But then at the same time, say if we expose them half an hour per day, they may be able to gain all the benefit instead of all the negative part. So what do you think about that?
well, I think, to not expose them at all, what you will do at that point, I think in many cases, is you're going to create, if you'll pardon my use of this word, I'm using it in a proper sense, not a vulgar sense, you will create a lust on the part of the child for that particular technology.
Right.
Is what's going to happen.
Right.
You will do that. But, so, in a sense, I agree with you. Here's the thing. And I'll just use a mundane example. I use my calculator for almost everything I do. But, I know my multiplication tables. I know my division tables. I know my addition subtraction tables. I even know how to do a few square roots in my head. Those are things, when we were kids, we use a term at the book, it's called, we want children to attain functional fluency. For example, how many, now some of you are Asian folks, are any of you first generation? Are you first generation here? So in America? Is this, were you born in Asia?
Yeah.
Okay, first generation. All right. Now, to say was, okay, how many of us have had Spanish in high school? Okay, if you went to, and how many years did you have?
Oh, probably 5 or 6.
5 or 6. Now you may have achieved what I'm talking about. How about you, Pastor?
I took 4.
4. Okay, pretty good grades?
Yep.
Okay, we won't go there. Anyway, if you were to go to Mexico today, you know, could you drop into the middle of a conversation that people were having and just do it?
Somewhat.
Hmm?
A little bit.
Well, you more.
A little
Yeah,
bit.
well, yeah.
Sure.
I have families.
Okay.
Yes, come
Yeah.
on.
Functional
Really
fluency.
almost
Functional fluency means that we know it so well that it doesn't fritter out the back of our heads. It compartmentalizes, but we can pull up on it anytime we need to. If my computer goes out, if my phone goes out, and I need to turn in an expense report, I can do that. It's not a problem. You know, it's just not a problem. I know I learned the grammar of mathematics so well. I'll tell you, you know, in the my father graduated during the time that you were talking about this test, and I thought about him. He was born in 1900. Now, give you a feel. Now, I was a humanities major, and ultimately, when I was teaching, I taught English and Bible and drama and things like this. My dad was an 8th grade graduate. He had to repeat elementary grades a total of 3 times, ultimately. He graduated and probably took a test very similar to that. He was from Miami, Florida. 8th grade graduate. That was it. He was done. He wasn't going to high school. He wasn't going to college. He joined the Army. Or the Coast Guard, I should say, for 2 years and then went on to the Army. But when I did my PhD work at the University of Oregon, and I was looking for somebody who could proof my PhD dissertation, I took it to my father with an 8th grade education. He had a mind like a steel trap when it came to grammar, when it came to style and everything.
I have heard that, that around that period, it's 1912, when a kind of a more progressive view of,
Yeah.
it became mandatory to go to school till 12th grade. It used to be 8th grade, it was compulsory. That my grandfather was also just at 12th grade. But they say that a person who graduated, their English, with just an 8th grade education, their English ability surpasses even that of a doctor of jurisprudence today.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I say that honestly. My
Why is
dad,
that?
Because the education was so much better
Oh.
and so much more complete, like what he was talking about. The fundamentals were so much more
they had to do
More
something.
solid.
complete, yeah.
They had to do something in those years that we've really gotten away from, and that is they had to memorize stuff.
That's right.
But the memorization is no different than sight reading, sight memorization. That's not a solution. They memorize way worse. Look, now, as a matter of principle, I'll disagree with everything you've said. Technology is not the problem. It's either bad parenting or bad teaching. Now, when you're going to draw the line, well, I'm not going to use a pencil because that's a new development. Oh, we got to back up. Why don't we go be crazy Baptists, like you said? They've got good education.
Sure.
So technology is not the problem. It's never been the problem. Now you can do this. The reason you get these results is because you got bad parenting. You got bad teaching. Now if I can pull up my phone and work a problem in 5 minutes, I would take somebody else an hour to write out this. Why don't I do that problem in 5 minutes? Take those other 55 minutes to interact with people. You know, I can solve other problems. Why don't I use what technology I have to solve the problem that's already been solved and solve new problems? You know, the Newton standing on the shoulders of giants. Why do I want to go relearn the same things people have already learned?
Well,
Why
he
can't I
learned
build
the
on
basics.
this?
He learned the basics.
Well, of course we're going to learn the basics. We're not going to sacrifice the basics.
Sure.
But technology is not the problem. Technology is simply a tool. So we're trying to argue, what tools do I use and which tools do I don't use? When do I stop using
Well, no,
tools?
for early education.
Not
Not
find
for
it interesting
us.
to use a high-tech device to teach us a low-tech lesson.
Sure.
There's a contradiction there.
No,
So
well,
why would I do that?
because there's different.
I actually,
Yeah.
it point out a good point. The tool itself is not the problem. It's about how to use it. I think that's fundamental things.
That's
So, for example, the parenting, I totally agree with him. Parenting, for example, the screen time, watching TV. TV has been around for 50 years now, but different family.
But it was bad when it came out.
Yeah.
You can't use TV.
So the different family use TV in a completely different way. So for example, one family just show the kids by the TV by themselves, don't give them any guidance. So the kids will basically just flip around by themselves. They're watching only inappropriate content. But another parent, he tell the child, today you have half an hour for TV. They turn on the channel, CBS channel, say you are middle schooler, you need to know what happening in the world. So that child sitting from TV, learn half an hour TV about the world news, everything. I think that's a great way to use TV because the child will know what happening in this world for half an hour, know all the news. I think if the child never do that, the child become very, very narrow-minded, no knowledge at all about this real world.
Well, see,
So,
you know, Mrs.
yeah,
Piper,
that's-
she gives
that's a
me
true way.
spelling this. We forget ours sometimes. I'm sorry. I'm not teasing, okay? But we text Ariel, and she'll take a picture and send it to us, and we'll pass it on to Leah. So should we just come and get our tallies? And too bad for us.
Okay, if I may interject here,
Sure.
what
No,
is
no.
different about this and whatever is the faith of the people changed. If they were being educated to glorify God and further the kingdom of God, then you would learn things well so you could do it well. Now, we've lost a lot. I don't even know if we're calling it post-Christian anymore.
Sure.
In terms of that. And so it's not a question of, I don't want people to learn bad philosophy, ungodly things. So when I used to teach, because I'm a homeschool veteran mom, when I was teaching writing, I would tell people that there were 4 kinds of people. Those who had something to say and said it well, those who had something to say and said it poorly, those who had nothing to say and said it well, and those who had nothing to say and said it poorly. And I said, I didn't care about those other 2. And if you want to, just turn on the television, you'll see the people who had nothing to say and say it well, right? So what we want to do is teach those who have something to say, and if you know the Lord Jesus Christ and you are a Christian, then education is to help you say all those things better. And whether or not you use a computer or not, the problem is, and you see it in the grocery store, because parents can't discipline their children, they put the iPad there, and then the kid's like this or whatever, and then the iPad dies, and now he's screaming, and now the parent doesn't know what to do, right? So we've lost the faith that made men like Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, even though we don't like all their politics or
Sure.
everything they did, but there was a foundation there.
Right.
That was basically it. So
A fabric, yeah.
the importance of Christian education, however you do it, is that they learn that they're not accidents. Most kids in public schools.
But that's a
think-
different issue. That's got nothing to do with technology.
Right, but I'm saying,
Did you know there's a spelling error on this? Did anybody else caught it besides me?
Yeah, there's a couple spelling errors.
Yeah, I
actually.
mean,
And I actually Googled that
Well,
because
it's a different era too.
Yeah, I was thinking it's
there's
different.
so many different ways to
It's
know
not a
what the
spelling
spelling
error.
error
It's a spelling error.
But I think the point I was trying to make with technology is to recognize that there are different stages of basically education and different goals for different stages of education. I imagine that when your students leave Canterbury, they're going to be the best typists, the best engineers, best software coders. They're going to be the best in all those others because everything else, as you pointed out, is built on this foundation. Right? And so there's nothing else you can do. There's no technology that can substitute the foundation of grammar stage learning. So there's nothing that can there's no app, there's no computer, there's nothing that can replace the practice, the work, the discipline, the morality that comes from grammar stage development.
But we can become stymied and only learning that, but there's this and this also available to us.
Yes.
Finding
So-
that balance.
Of course.
Yeah,
No
the balance.
isolating ourselves, and,
Sure.
well, we're just gonna do this because it was done like in 1912, that's the worst reason for me to do it.
But remember, the computers were imitating the human brain, which God designed. And so you better learn how to use that well first,
Okay, well-
so you can find out
Yes.
if your calculator is saying 2 times 2 is 9.
Oh.
And wait a minute, that's wrong. Most people can't tell that if they never learned their basics, and that's the point of learning the basics.
And have you ever seen anybody here ever work in a McDonald's or a Burger King or anything like that? You ever seen what the registers actually look like?
Yeah,
Pictures.
picture.
The pictures of hamburgers, and milkshakes and things. It's because the kids can't put in the numbers, so I mean, they bypass, now they have a keypad down here at the bottom that they usually have to call the manager to put something in, and I'm not kidding.
But there's also another reason for that, because the managers and the owners don't trust them not to steal. So if they just have a hamburger,
That could be very well too.
because they don't trust them.
Yeah,
That's a different problem, it has nothing to do with technology.
I would agree that, you know, in order, what I would want, Bill? Bill, yeah, what I would want to know would be, yeah, I certainly will do the same thing. If I can solve a problem on my computer in 5 minutes, or in 5 seconds, why take 60 minutes to do it on paper? That makes a whole lot of sense. But I want a student that I'm teaching math to be able, if the computer dies or something, I want them to know the rudiments of how to solve that problem. So if they had to do it in 60 minutes, they're capable. Like I said, you give me a math problem, I don't need to have this. This makes me work very fast. But I can do it the other way. And we've lost some of that in our children today.
I get in my car, drive down to Fry's and get it faster than you can do it in an hour. I thought there's a different way to solve the same problem.
I understand.
So I believe in math. I'm really good. I'm a good scholar, and I love what y'all do for me, and I encourage as much as I can. But I'm saying, why don't we? It's not technology is not the problem. It's how we use it. It's how we build on that. You know,
We're
let's take
talking
these
about
rudiments.
here in our classrooms, not at your house, not after school. Not at, when she's not here or he is not here. We're talking about the best use of our time and resources here at our school for these ages of children. Why are we low tech? Because we're giving them the fundamentals, we're teaching them analogical thinking. And they can be productive, and have a base for the greenhouse effect for everything else that comes out of this. Once they leave here, I know a lot of them use screen time. I can tell you which ones do, because they don't know what to do with free time. They don't know how to use time that isn't constructed for them. But
And there's always gonna be exceptions.
Okay, that's bad parenting, not bad technology.
but we're talking about
Hope it's not.
right here, right now. And so in technology is not, we're not talking about in your home, we're talking about here at our school, why we're low tech. And not apologizing for it.
Oh, so you're not, okay, so I just wanna make sense, because I really appreciate the low tech approach, so we're not discussing bringing in computers and.
No.
No.
That was very passionate.
What?
No, that's okay. I actually,
No.
when I grew up in Romania, and there was no such thing as technology anywhere.
Sure.
And I went to school in Germany, it was quite the opposite. I was actually fortunate enough to be in both the school systems and see the benefit in both. I chose Canterbury I actually signed up Marcus at our Cupertino highly acclaimed school that's behind our community, and I took him out of school. I signed him up in the public school, and I took him out of the school, and I brought him here. Number one reason was that yes, there's low tech, yes, they do use cursive, and yes, they do learn Latin. We are from Romania, Latin is our language. Those three things were the main things that attracted me to the school.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were in uniform, okay, I'm gonna be honest. But this is what it teaches Marcus.
Now, if they
No
serve
tech.
lunch too, we'd be happy, we'd have.
This is what it teaches Marcus. When Sunday comes around, I have to dress him for church. He knows this is church, I have to dress up a certain way. I go to school, I have to dress up a certain way. I go play soccer, I have to dress up a certain way. That is going to make him into a real man. He's gonna go to office, he's gonna dress like for office. He's gonna go play golf, he's gonna know. I have to, there's a certain,
It's a professionalism.
and he looks at me when I'm coming to pick him up and I'm not from work. He goes, oh, you're not wearing your work clothes. I'm like, I didn't even realize I have 4 clothes, but I do. And those were the things that attract. And I took him out of the Cupertino school that everybody else will do anything to be in that school. I actually took him out of it. I mean, he never started school. I signed him up, and 2 days later, whatever, I took him out for that reason. So I would not even consider. And yeah, he uses technology at home. Yeah, he uses it everywhere else. But he knows how to spell his name. He knows how to write nicely. He's working hard to write nicely. He can write a letter to his babysitter, the babysitter when he was a baby, in cursive. She is absolutely impressed. She's a 75-year-old lady that he still keeps in touch with. She was his first babysitter. He can write a letter like a proper.
So I think the issue here is relying on technology. Have you ever used your navigation system in your car and it took you to the outer limits place and you're like, wait a minute, this is not where I wanted to go. So technology can fail because it's fallible. So the whole idea of the low-tech classroom is to make sure that you can use the technology if it suits you, but if it doesn't work or it's not there, that you can still function, and that's what being a functionally literate and educated person means.
So I think that the low-tech approach is actually perfect for the elementary school age.
That's right.
Because for this age, the child is still doing brain development. I read a lot of neuroscience actually, because I have 3 kids. From neuroscience perspective, for the brain development, cursive writing, memorization is perfect to expand the brain. So even sometimes my 8th grade boy actually complained to me sometimes. He said, "Oh no, I'm in middle school now. I did so much cursive writing in elementary school. Now we use computer all the time, so it looks like I waste all my time." At that time, I said, "No, you don't waste your time." So I explained to him. I said, "You need to go through that stage. Now you are 14. When you are 6 years old, the cursive writing is perfect to basically help you develop your brain. So it's not about the result; it's about the process." Now got it. So that's how I explained to him.
That's exactly right.
So this approach,
Great explanation.
so for the low-tech approach, it's perfect for elementary school, but I do not think it's perfect for high schooler. Because high schooler at that age is before they get into the adulthood of the workforce. They need to be trained for all the high-tech, how to get into the real world. I think the next time, at that time, the brain development almost stop at that time. So the school should provide all the high-tech to get them used to the professionalism, everything. But then for elementary school, I think low-tech is perfect. That's kind of my perspective.
I'll give you a little, my grandson, his dad teaches at a Becker program over in Ontario, Oregon. It's a little school, and about this size. And they have a high school though. And my grandson, he wrote me today that he texted me, he said that
You can use that in a classroom.
that's right, it was fun. He's texted me on things that he had straight A's, and that as a reward for, because he's a 6th grader, and he's getting ready to go into 7th grade. His dad and mom had purchased, he's always wanted a computer. And they have them in the house, but he could use theirs, but he never had one of his own. Well, he wanted one. And so it was kind of a Christmas present that they gave him. They gave him the pieces of all and Dad says to him,
Put together,
he says, "We will build it together,
Oh, that's great.
and we will learn how it works, and we will." And my son-in-law is perfectly capable of doing that. He knows. So for him, at this point, going into 7th grade, he is making a rites de passage, as the French would say. It's not that he's been unfamiliar with these things. You mentioned TV and all these other things. I don't know how much time I want to take on this, but there's people, oftentimes I have, and you may have the same thing. And this is it's a prescription that parents don't often want to hear. They really don't. But it will work. I promise you. If they do it, it will work. I have a child that come in and he cannot read well. He doesn't comprehend what he reads. You know all the variants of that.
That's right.
No, my prescription is for folks like that, because before I did my current job at the Becker Book, I was a principal and teacher for 22 years. So I've got a little bit under my belt. And I tell them, and only about 1 in 5 ever did this, but the people that would come in, but the ones that did, I never had one look back. If you have a child that's having difficulty reading and communicating and doing things like this, get rid of your TV. Let's not even worry about your computer. Get rid of your TV. Get rid of it.
I actually don't have TV.
Yeah.
I've
Get
got
rid of it. Yeah, get rid of it. I was going to say, if you'll indulge me,
Sure.
this comes from a great authority named Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And so I don't know if you remember the poem Mike TV.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
The most important thing we've learned so far as children are concerned is never, never, never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. In almost every house we've been, we watch them gaping at the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week we saw some, in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they're hypnotized by it. Until they're absolutely drunk with all the shocking, ghastly junk. Oh yes, we know what keeps them still. They don't climb out the windowsill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But did you ever stop and think? To wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved talk. It rots the senses in the head. It kills imagination dead. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind he can no longer understand the fantasy of fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think. He only sees. All right, you say. All right, you cry. But if we take the set away, what do we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. We'll answer this by asking you, what used the darling ones to do? How used they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten? Don't you know? Then we'll say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott, gadzooks, 1/2 their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore. The books cluttered up the nursery floor. In the bedroom by the bed, more books were waiting to be read. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic takes of dragons, gypsies, queens, and whales. And treasured isles and distant shores where smugglers rode with muffled oars, and pirates wearing purple pants, and sailing ship and elephants, and cannibals crouching round the pot, stirring away at something hot. It smells so good, what can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope. The younger ones had Beatrix Potter with Mr. Todd and Dirty Rotter, and Squirrel Nutkin, Piglet Land, and Mrs. Tiggly Winkle, and just how the camel got his hump, and how the monkey lost his rump, and Mr. Toad, and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Mole. Oh, books, what books they used to know, these children living long ago. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV set away. And in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. And fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks. The screams and yells and bites and kicks of children hitting you with sticks. Fear not, because we promise you that in about a week or two of having nothing else to do, they'll now begin to feel the need of having something good to read. And once they start, oh boy, you'll watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen, they wonder what they've ever seen in that ridiculous machine. Well, that's the end. He goes on to some more. I'll stop there. But that I think, you know, like I said, that's a great educational authority there. But I think it captures it, it's what you're driving at. This is what we want, and he was whacking on the TV because the computers didn't exist at that point.
Sure.
But the idea is, yeah, I have TV in my house, but it was not something we watched a lot. I'm not saying totally get rid of it, but, you know, kids could watch it a little bit on Saturday morning, we let them watch cartoons a little bit.
After our chores.
Yeah, you know, and you know, it's funny, my daughter, youngest daughter, Alicia, if you went to her house today, she literally has books all over the walls, everywhere. Now they have computers, they have big TV screen in their bedroom, but that's not what the kids do. They don't sit and watch TV. Now, they may play this and that game or do this, but they don't do that. And the same is true, they don't spend a lot of time playing a lot of computer games. Now, that's something they do vacations, weekends, a little bit, but not at school.
Yeah. No,
That's,
thank you. Is there any other comments or thoughts?
I
before we-
just have a story to tell that,
Yeah, we have
had a
about 10
proven
minutes
point.
left.
I have a friend who teaches special ed at public school, and I told him that if he ever had any students that were struggling and their parents were willing, that I would help them with their reading. And so he had this one family, and these were the terms. We were gonna meet at the library, and he was in 4th grade and he couldn't read, and anyway, so I took him through a phonics course. It wasn't the effective phonics course, it was something called Alpha Phonics by Sam Blumenfeld, and I took him all the way through it. A half an hour once a week. The kid's teachers went to his mother and saying, "Who's the therapist who's working with your son?" They had him in special programs and everything else. He couldn't read. Suddenly, he wasn't a behavior problem anymore, and whatever it was, and so then we worked all the way through the summer. He went back to school, and I'm sad to say his teachers had such a low expectation that we had already finished the phonics book, and now I had Bible stories, which was my ultimate thing, that he was going to read little Bible stories and use his reading skills, but they squashed it, and it wasn't cool that he was answering questions and stuff like that. So I did have him for a year, and he did learn to read, and his mother still stays in touch with me, but they were sure he was working with a specialist, you know. And when he said it was too hard, I'd say, sound it out. But it's hard, I know, sound it out. And they had to pay me $5 every time they showed up, and I said, he has to hand me the money. And I used the money to buy the book, so I ended up giving him, but he had to see, and when he wasn't doing his work, I'd say, I think you're wasting my time and your parents' money. You know, he'd get right back onto it and stuff like that. So what's missing in these approaches to things that don't include discipline is that the kids don't learn discipline. So if you have to memorize things or you have to write cursive, you have to force yourself to do something you don't want to do. How many here do things every day they don't want to do?
Not these two.
Yeah, my boss is here, I can't answer that.
They love it. They would do it for free, but I make them take a paycheck.
They're not doing it for free?
I really do appreciate Canterbury, the school provided low time. Really, especially when my older daughter, she go to King's now, and I'm really a little bit disappointed. I mean,
Well, they kind of an iPad in like day one. Like, welcome to King's.
That's a new development.
Yeah,
It is a new development, so it's not how it's always been.
I did not expect.
Yeah, there's other reasons, but.
I wish, Canterbury, I don't know if you know any school that in the middle school to high school, no computer, let me know.
Of course, your home school can have a computer.
Oh, but yeah, I really appreciate that part, it's really good.
But for the record, I don't disagree. And somebody has to be contrary, otherwise there's not much discussion going on. So anyway,
Yes.
you all know that, right?
Thank you for
We love being
volunteering
here,
for
we love
contrary.
being here, we chosen for low
Well, I was hoping,
technology
I was hoping Dr. King would be more contrarian, but he just likes me too much. So.
I would call you the devil's advocate, but I don't think that's a good term.
I don't like this, I can
Discussion
just-
advocate.
If you take your car to that, what was the name of the place you take your car? You were talking about, if I take it down to.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
Fries, Best
If
Buy,
they
all
don't,
the
if they
people.
don't have a computer to fix it,
They don't do it tomorrow, what's the hurry?
they don't know how to do it anymore. They can't diagnose. Your doctor can't diagnose much anymore. They've lost
But
it.
these are all different problems than just, we're just talking about the tool of technology.
Yeah.
Technology's not the enemy, it's
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but-
not written. So
I
I
got
have a
most of
question.
the answers.
You mentioned all your grandchildren and all your grandchildren all go to
Christian
Christian school.
Some of them
I wonder.
changed.
Or
what's the-
homeschool.
Yeah,
Some of
so
them changed
what's,
since then.
what's the fundamental reason you are against public school or what's the difference from public school and
It has to do with philosophy of education. Basically, for me personally, I believe that children are created in the image of God. It's a religious conviction.
religious?
And it's also a concept, if you want to take it over into a little more, what would appear on the surface to be more of a secularist type of thing, it would be, in the public